As the prophet of esports, I rely on trustworthy and meaningful data every day. Data from our research partner YouGov offers the most complete view of esports fans and gamers in the world, providing context to who they are, what they think, the brands they buy, and things they do. YouGov's connected insights and research services inform strategy at every level. If you're a team, a brand, agency, or rights holder, you should be talking with YouGov. Their partners measure and maximize ROI and are telling compelling stories with data. Visit yougov.com/gaming-esports to learn more. FTX and TSM commit to largest deal in esports history. It was like teased at the beginning of or last week when we did last week's live stream and podcast. They finally announced it. 210 million British pounds. I think it works out to about $250 million, if I'm not mistaken. And that has secured FTX the exclusive naming rights for TSM. So now TSM, the esports org and brand, will be known as TSM FTX, which we can talk about if we like that name at all. But basically, they're claiming it's the largest and longest term deal in esports history. Company employees and players are going to receive cryptocurrency because FTX is in the cryptocurrency business. So they're an exchange and primarily an exchange, right? Cryptocurrency exchange. So they bought TSM's naming rights. Let me just, before we dive into this, mention also there was another naming rights deal in the same week where Dignitas signed a naming rights deal for their LCS team with QuantumPay. And QuantumPay, if I'm not mistaken, is also in the at least fintech / crypto space. And so we're seeing these teams sell their naming rights. TSM, obviously the big one and the big news. What do you guys think of these deals, first of all? Do we like the name? Is it a bunch of fluff? Do we think FTX will ever recoup that investment? I'm just curious, general thoughts. Jeff?
Can I start with a hot take? I mean, I sort of hate these naming rights deals for the esports industry. I mean, it's great in the sense that they get headlines, they're big numbers, and frankly, these teams are struggling, or some of them are struggling to make money. So it's a nice source of revenue. And I think William, you may have brought this up many podcasts or live streams ago. Just as you think about, building a brand as a team, you would never see the Green Bay Packers sell, it be the Green Bay Packers Coca-Cola. It just, right. To me, it's so
the Detroit
lowbrow.
5 Hour Energy Renegades. What was?
Yeah, I don't know. I just jersey, make it like NASCAR, have the logos everywhere. I don't care about that. Arenas, whatever. To me, it's it shows me that you don't have other real sources of revenue. And it's you needed to basically sell your firstborn child. You can name my kid, whatever. I'll take anything. Just give me some money. It's desperation, I think. Unless maybe it's just, you can say, okay, it's a new paradigm, blah, 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 blah. Esports is different from traditional sports. We don't have to follow the same, path. Fine. But it's this is your brand as a team. Paul, if I came to you with, if some brand came to you and say, rename yourself, not Paul Dawalibi, you're going to be, Slim Jim Dawalibi.
For 250 million? Call me Slim Jim.
Depends what, to be fair, it depends what they're offering. I agree.
Hang on.
Say they're offering slightly less than that. I just think it's a little lowbrow. That's my hot take.
Reach out to me, Slim Jim. I got you. Don't worry. 250 million bucks.
That's wow. He did. If anyone listens to, do we have an audio version of Liza Minute, or has he changed his name to Slim Jim?
No, I wouldn't. Right? You're right. And it's a hot take, but I would never sell my name, right? Because there's reputation associated with that, and that's worth more than any amount of money. So we can joke about it, but the reality is I wouldn't. And I agree with you completely, Jeff, that this is their brand. And the weird part is that TSM had sort of what I would call a premium brand, right? They're a team that was all about winning. And if I saw this out of FaZe Clan, I would have been I kind of get it, right? It's they'll sell themselves for $1 any way they can. TSM to me always felt a little more premium, more focused on the games and winning.
Even
And
more like a legacy brand too.
Yeah, the number 250 million seems big, but in the long run, I actually think this is, to Jeff's point, it reeks of desperation, and I think it's pretty short-sighted. Like, the brand is fundamentally the value of these teams. That's it.
Yeah, and I completely agree with Jeff. Like, I think it is a new paradigm, and the way we are doing things is shifting, but get creative. You live in esports. It's electronic. The whole thing is made up. We can do whatever we want. You can put things on your characters in game to, you know what I mean? Like, I feel like there's so many more visual ways to actually and effectively advertise to that team fan base that is so much better than what they came up with this time around. But I'm totally in agreement with you guys. I think there was a much better way to do it.
Jimmy B or Lindsay or William, do any of you guys think this will work out well for FTX? Like, do you think at the end, what's the length of the contract? Sorry, I forget now. Sorry?
I thought it was around 10 years, wasn't it?
Yeah. Like, does anyone think at the end of this contract, FTX will say this was totally worth the dollars we spent?
I don't think FTX will be around at the end of this contract. Aren't they like a cryptocurrency exchange?
Yes.
Like the fifth best cryptocurrency exchange?
I mean, it's a big amount of money to commit.
So honest. You're so honest.
And it seems like a low impact kind of thing. Like, I feel like no one's going to call the team TSM FTX. You know what I mean? Like, the casters won't, the fans won't.
It's like one of those law firms, right? With 6 names, you just do the first 2 and then you're done.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, nobody reads out all the law firm names.
Well, then I sort of have 2 counterpoints to that. The first is, not that I don't agree with everything Beth said, and I don't think that this is a great idea. But the first thing is, if your brand is already strong enough anyway, then why not just take the money and run? If this is all the case and nobody's going to say anything and it's just some news point and it's an exchange that's going to go by the wayside anyway, then what's the harm?
True. Other than, yeah, you're right. You're assuming that no one will, like, and I think you're right. Like, does anyone think a TSM fan previously sees this deal and goes, I'm not going to cheer for TSM anymore because now they're TSM FTX? No, right? Like, probably not. So it doesn't hurt them. It's free money.
Yeah, and to Jeff's point, I just think, it's free money. Lindsay, I think you make a really good point. But to Jeff's point, there's got to be a better way to do it. But I totally agree. There's no harm. We were just talking about it. We're not going to call it TSM FTX. It's going to still be TSM. And I think Lindsay made a really good point. Like, yeah, they're probably just going to take those $250 million and keep going down on building this legacy for their team.
It's like the equivalent of Jeff's sort of funny example, I think, if we ran with it, right? It's as if Slim Jim paid me to put Slim Jim on my birth certificate, right? Change my birth, but everyone still calls me Paul, right? Like, effectively, it's like handing you free money.
You'd have to go by Slim Jim, though. It's like that episode of Community with the Subway guy. Remember, he changed his name to Subway. It's like you have to go by Subway.
And then he comes back as the Honda guy. Oh, great character.
William, what you were going to comment on this? You like this?
I mean, I'm really enjoying the dialogue about this because I see pros and cons on both sides. I'm genuinely thinking through both arguments because on the one hand, and it's a very compelling point, is $250 million. Like that's a big point, no matter how you cut it. On the other hand, are all the other concerns that everybody is allaying against this. Because let's be honest, the only reason to do this is the money, right? Let's be clear. There is no other strategic or value-driven reason to do this. It is entirely
the TSM gains nothing from this.
Yeah, it's entirely like there's no argument that can be made that this is a synergistic name change. Yeah,
they get a better name, right?
That's right. It's not like they were called before like Ye Old Cobblestone Store and Ranch, and now they're FTX. Like it's like this is they get an objectively worse name. Like this is, but yeah. So I'm weighing all of that. And the question I guess I'm coming down to, and this is a really fundamental question, which is why I'm like, whoa, on this is, what are these teams? Like what is, because essentially what this is saying is, the easy thing that you do as a brand marketer when you're defining a brand is you define the collection of assets that are the brand, right? And you want to make sure that whatever you're, holding, and typically one of the things in your holding ownership is the logo and the colors, right? Which go across everything and unify. And that's why it's such a big deal. That's why Coke cans look the same in every country. And like, that's the value of the brand, is consistency. And this is sort of saying like, no, we might have a different collection of attributes that matter, right? Like, we might not think the brand is the most important thing about our organization. And I'm really wrestling with that if that can be true, because it's interesting. If that's true, then sports teams have done it wrong. Like, if that's true, then sports teams have done it wrong, right? And like, you don't have any problem that there are sports stadiums named after brands, right? Like, think of every single stadium in the world is basically named after a brand sponsor. You know what I mean? So we don't think that's weird, right?
But William, why don't the sports teams do it? What's the theory there? Does anyone have a theory why every traditional sports team, because arguably if FTX is willing to offer TSM 250 million, there's some brand willing to offer more to, you guys mentioned the Green Bay Packers, right? Like, Lindsay, I don't know if...
Yeah. This is, so earlier when I said I had 2 points, and the first was basically like the name doesn't particularly matter. The second point was I kind of wanted to zoom out and look at how we all think of branding globally. And I think in the US, there's a very defined set of rules that people follow. And it tends to be this sort of keep your brand close to the best, don't take risks with it kind of attitude and approach. But I don't necessarily think that applies all over the world. And I will say TSM is a US based team, so they're kind of following their own rules here. But one of the things that was a really big wake up call for me was when I started watching European soccer. And because there's no commercials, there's a completely different way of advertising and getting out the message of sponsors of those games. And I quite frankly found it appalling. Like, I hated that the jerseys were messy. I hated that the stadiums were covered in things. I hated that the towels that they gave fans or t-shirts or whatever had sponsors on. Like, it drove me nuts at first. But that's just because I am accustomed to a certain way of brands maintaining basically, like, to their own detriment, the integrity. And I do think that changing that approach up is risky, obviously, but given that this is a new space, TSM has the opportunity to do it. And especially since they got another 3-letter company it's FTX, like it kind of is a, at least a mirror to TSM, like 3 letters, an acronym, whatever. It's easy to kind of roll it off the tongue and also just kind of forget about it. So this is kind of a low-level way, to me, of them reapproaching the way that they brand themselves in a way that someone like the Green Bay Packers could never do, because people have gotten very staunchly entrenched in the way that they view these legacy brands.
Cam asked a question here. Think they'll split in the long run? Do we think this deal will last?
But that's a really interesting. What happens after 10 years? Like, what do you have to like redo every? It's really interesting. But guys, I don't know. I mean, we can answer that question. I want to go the other side. Like, we've been talking about this very much from TSM's perspective. I'm more interested in the sponsors' perspective. Was this worth it? Because whether or not this is the right decision for TSM, like, the question is this going to be a trend across the industry? And if it's worth it for this sponsor, it likely will be a trend across the industry, right? So I want to dig into that a little more. Like, what do we think FTX gets from this? Like, tell me honestly, what do they get from this?
I think access to all, like, you know, you had to have been sleeping under a rock this past year if you weren't, you know, listening to the crypto craze, all this Pokemon stuff going on, and everything basically going into digital currency. And I think that's a massive base of people who are just legally getting access to trade their money. You know what I mean? And I think maybe they're looking for that spike in a user base to come to crypto. Because, like, I think for the audience that's younger, you know, Jeff, you had mentioned it, they're like the 4th or 5th most popular exchange. But in terms of brand presence, what other brands are present in esports and gaming in terms of crypto? And I think, William, you brought a really good point up about the sponsors. Like, TSM is a rare case in that they're a legacy team that succeeded without a title sponsor, pretty much. Like, you have teams in Europe, they're like Fun Plus Phoenix or like Shopify Rebellion or something like that. They've already got that title sponsor from the moment they're formed. So I think these types of deals will also get rarer and rarer as we see less and less legacy teams continue to exist. But I could be completely wrong in that as well.
I think that what they're counting on, William, my view on this is that, and I think most people would agree, that there's probably virtually perfect overlap between gamers and people interested in crypto, right? And to me, it's just access to that audience. I think it's that simple. I don't think it's much more complicated than that. It's gaming, and gaming fans and esports fans are probably the most target-rich audience for any of these exchanges. And I would argue the same for just about any cutting-edge fintech crypto play, right? Like if you're Robinhood, if you're whatever, you're any of these things that are at the cutting edge of finance, crypto, blockchain, all of these very cool technologies and movements. This is fundamentally where I see why I see FTX making this kind of move. That's what they're hoping to get out of this.
But the question is, like, it's not, customer overlap is not the reason to do this, though. I want to push back because but like, you can buy a ton of TV commercials. You can buy a ton of online ads with direct click, right? You can buy, like, I mean, 20 million, like, we're not talking like you're on the B-roll post fold on a news site. That's like, you could be the title sponsor of a Super Bowl commercial. You know what I mean? And I know that's not.
You can buy a lot of Super Bowl commercials for 250 million.
That is the point I'm making. Is like, the question I'm asking is that the alternative for this for FTX was not market at all. It's spend all of this money to market through a name change, or buy tons and tons of basically infinite other marketing, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, that's the thing that I'm.
But it's more. I think it's more a statement on the crypto world than on the gaming world, right? Like these crypto companies are flush with investor cash. They're flush with customer cash, right? Everything has been going up for the last 10 years, and so you get maybe some crazy spending, right? And maybe you even call it irresponsible spending, right? Was 250 million the right number to plunk on one sort of marketing activation? You're right. That's maybe a tough question to answer. That's not such a tough question to answer, right? Would you have done it? Would anyone in this room have made the same move? Jimmy B, you have $250 million. You're FTX. Is TSM the first place you would have looked?
Probably not.
Okay.
I mean, just think about, like, what are
great?
Like, they could have given TSM 50 million, and I think TSM would have been over the moon and still would have made all the headlines. We'd all still be talking about it, right? Like, does anyone think a $50 million deal wouldn't have got the same amount of play?
That's a good point. The other thing is, like, what else can you buy for like 250 million? You can launch your own games. Like, that's what Epic has spent launching the Epic Game Store, right? Like, you can like make the sales platform. And I know it's not quite a parallel, but like when these large sums of money change hands, like, it's like you really have to contextualize it. And it's like they literally could have launched, funded, and created their own MOBA and shooter. Probably, and they probably could have been. I mean, again, I'm not saying
and bought all of TSM's players.
Yeah, who knows? Yeah,
for 250 million.
Yeah.
I just want to read some of these comments because I'm getting behind, guys.
They could have built half a stadium in Toronto.
That's true. They would have had 3,000 seats. Terry says, "FYI, TBD, WTF, TSM." It rolls off the tongue just as nice. Christian, I don't see the name change as a great brand move for TSM. It's a lot of money, but it's too much of a mouthful. Maybe the beginning of the end of TSM brand. I mean, they have 250 million locked in now, so chances are their bills are mostly paid, I would think. Like, this puts TSM probably in profitable territory, I would hope. I don't know if you guys think. Does anyone think this is the beginning of the end of the TSM brand? Probably not.
I was a little concerned about TSM in the years leading up to this because we had kept hearing about them, making moves into the streamer world and really in terms of content, but they weren't winning titles anymore. They don't have that sort of championship credibility anymore, and they haven't for years. And so for me as a fan of TSM, my passion for following them is kind of waning because they don't have these star players. They didn't even make it to Iceland for Valorant. Like, these are their premier things and they're not able to achieve in them. However, there's clearly something else going on that we don't know about, that they see value in, I think.
Isn't that then a whole lot worse for TSM? Just play this out, because basically what you're saying is, well, the collection of attributes, like TSM to me used to stand for winning. Well, they're not winners anymore. So why are you loyal to TSM? It's something, like,
I think it's like the Yankees problem, right? Like, they haven't been good in forever, but you're still a Yankees fan because they're the Yankees. They were the team back in the day. And so, like, even the branding of TSM, I feel like, is iconic in the same sense. But I think, to your point, maybe with that extra money, like 250 is a lot. Maybe more of it goes to funding esports teams that actually win for once and aren't just jokes and knocked out of tournaments all the time. And maybe that also funds their further success in this 10-year plan. Maybe, I'm thinking, honestly, Ramsey made a good point in the comments as well, talking about content creators and their 10-year plan and streamers and things like that. Maybe that's the road they'll head down instead. But I think you bring up a good point with that.
Yeah, Greg mentioned that FTX also bought the rights to rename the Miami Arena. So they clearly have a lot of money to throw around. So this was not their only play. Cam said, agrees with Jeff. And Greg says, do you believe FTX can bring any value besides the funding? Opening up new markets, NFTs. Does anyone think they needed FTX for that? Maybe that would be my sort of question. Like, could they not have done any of those things, NFTs or new markets, without FTX?
That's the most compelling part to me about all of this, was what you'd mentioned, where for a lot less money, they could have achieved every one of these different initiatives, right? Each year, or maybe one this year, one next year, the same press, higher ROI. So it's just like, what was the thinking there is kind of the most perplexing part about this.
I mean, I'm going to agree with all these FTX moves because I'm thinking we should be reaching out to FTX.
Paul, get on it.
I will rename myself.
Click it, ship it, print it. Yeah.
If next week this is the Business of Esports FTX podcast,
no, we'll just call it FTX, the Business of Esports. We won't even. But yeah, I think I want to point one last quickly on this thing. It's like, is the dollar value actually as large as we think? This is the other thing I was thinking, because it's 250 million, which is huge. But divide it by 10, right? Because this is a 10-year deal, right? I'm just sort of, the other thing I'm wondering about
let me point something out on this point. It's a good point, William. It's 21 million British pounds per year, okay, for 10 years. But that's twice what they paid for the naming rights of that NBA stadium for the Miami Heat. So they paid half for the naming rights for the Miami Heat's arena.
Naming rights for stadiums aren't very expensive.
But I would argue that an NBA franchise is going to be a lot larger audience, I would think.
Yeah, it's more valuable to me to have the naming rights on a stadium than the naming rights on an esports team, I think, in terms of the audience.
At least today.
At least
right?
today,
maybe not 5 years from now, maybe not 10 years from now. But maybe that's their bet, right? Like, part of the thinking here could be 10 years from now, maybe people will be charging $100 million a year, pick a number, right? To sponsor, to get the naming rights for an esports team. And if I lock in 25 million a year now, I'm good, right? I'm golden. I don't know. Maybe they're betting that those prices are going to go up very quickly. I mean, William, I don't know.
No, good point. But then the flip side is, then who knows more about the esports market, TSM or FTX? Because if that's true, why is TSM going to sign a deal? Why are they going to lock? Oh, great, we'll sign it now. We'll lock in that low rate. You know what I mean? Like this is the best deal for us ever. Yeah. Like, I'm just making the point.
They just set the rate too. I'm sorry, William, but like, to your point, did they just set the rate for the rest of the industry as well?
Yeah, maybe they have. Right? Do we see deals? Who thinks that we're going to see deals? And in chat also, who thinks we're going to see deals at this scale with other teams? Like, will we see a FaZe deal? Will we see a 100 Thieves deal? Will we see those things?
I don't know. I think FaZe and 100 Thieves are very egoistic and they have their brand. They're going to run with it. But I agree with you too. The 100 Thieves Cash App compound, that's like a thing already.
True. Will we see 100 Thieves Cash App be like the name of the team for an extra, 25 million a year? Jeff,
To
you're
your
shaking
point,
your
no
head.
one. Well, to your point, I don't think anyone would call it that. So, the one thing with it being TSM FTX, it kind of like Lindsay said earlier, it does roll off the tongue a little bit. Like 100 Thieves Cash App, that's not a name. Like that's not a noun.
I'll tell you what, and this might be one good thing to wrap on, but regardless if it's a good idea or not, they were smart to be first. You know what I mean? Like, because however much of a lot of the reason why this is getting so much lift in play is because it's the first time it's happened, right? The third time this happens, think we're going to talk about it this much? We'll be like, it'll just be like another sponsorship. We'll be like, there's another car company coming into E. So I'm just saying, like, in some sense, this sort of is, I think, like the crypto market mentality is like, just go huge at new things. You know what I mean? And like, I don't know. That's just interesting.
I just want to get through these comments and then we'll move on, guys. Ramsey says, parallel in the sports world is Red Bull, who owns soccer teams across Europe, and Red Bull features in all the team names. Yeah, I mean, Red Bull seems to do that better than anyone, right? Like even in F1, which I'm a big fan of, like Red Bull Racing, it's unusual to have sort of the sponsor be the main part of the name, but Red Bull seems to get away with it. Maybe because Red Bull is cool, right?
Yeah, they have a brand. Like Red Bull is cool. Like you want to be part of Red Bull. Like,
they are owners, though, not just sponsors. True. Also, a 10-year deal means they benefit from all of esports and TSM's growth across their streamers across the world, knowing that they will be hitting their target audience. Yeah, I mean, Ramsey, I think the discussion has been around this, though. Like, are they getting their money's worth, even with the content creators, even with all those things? Unclear, right? Like I don't know TSM's numbers specifically enough to be able to say. But I just want to read Christian's comment here before I get to the other ones, because I think this is the answer to many of these questions, which is, I hope we see more of these deals. Rising tide raises all boats. I think it's good for everybody, right? Whether we think they pay too much, they pay too little, they won't get enough out of it, they're going to get plenty out of it. It's good for the industry as a whole.
I don't know, guys. I don't know if this is a rising tide floats all the boats scenario. I don't know if I believe that. Well,
why?
Let me put it this way, right? And I'm just giving you an example. Let's say I'm Activision Blizzard and I'm franchising a new game, right? Who can I get to participate in this game? I can get teams. We know what teams will pay for franchises, right? I can get them to pay 20, 30, or do I call up AT&T? You know, like the point I'm making here is I think we have to be careful about what this really means, because when something as fundamental as the brand is going to be played with, it really goes to a fundamental question of what's necessary here, right? Like what's about, like, and take my example seriously, like Shopify created their own esports team, right? Like, why couldn't Blizzard do the same thing and have a league? And why can't the next league for, whatever it's going to be, why can't that be 8 corporations who do what Shopify did?
That's kind of what the Overwatch League is, though, isn't it? Like,
that's a very good point. Actually, you could argue the Overwatch League is that it's the power.
I think the CDL is
from whole cloth. Yeah,
I think 100% that's what they went for.
That's an extreme example. I'm not saying it, but like I just think this is something deeper here, and it may end up only leaving a cosmetic change, right? But there's a real fundamental question being asked about what is the collection of what is the value? Where is the value in a team? And this is saying the value of the team is not in the name. Okay. But then it gets
I don't know
hard.
if it's really saying that, William, because they're paying $250 million for that name.
I think there's also value in what
some
he's saying.
Value on the name.
No,
I think it's kind of 50-50, because you have these established brands in like Optic and FaZe who are trying to get into the Call of Duty League or something like that, and they literally had to change their entire brands, which did not work, and it failed miserably. And now you see them. It's Optic Chicago, Atlanta FaZe, like Jimmy B mentioned earlier. Like, I think they will run into these problems, and I think there'll be growing pains for sure. And I think they're going to have to figure it out, because I think the brand is that important. Like the Huntsman, who's going to remember the Huntsman 5 years from now? It's going to be Optic Chicago. It's going to be Atlanta FaZe. Like the Minnesota Rocker. What is that? Like these things are I think
That's marketing genius Gary Vaynerchuk behind that one, though. Come on, guys.
Yeah, you gotta
Doesn't
love
it
it.
have an umlaut in it too, or something?
Yeah, it's a Rooker, like, because we're Vikings. Oh, in Minnesota. Like, why? Come on.
Cam
And
says
there
100
goes
Thieves
our
and commit
Midwest.
to the dynasty. Way more pull in LA. And Christian says, I think it had to be a bigger deal for the PR. Plus, it's finance related, so it has to be a large number. Yeah, I think, like I said, I think 50 million would have been a large enough number to get the PR impact. I don't think they needed 150.